My birthday began with the station's artificial sunrise flickering twice, and then giving up, which felt appropriate. When you live on a rotating diplomatic habitat that can't decide whether it's morning or night, expectations tend to lower themselves for you. I was in the middle of arguing with a malfunctioning food printer about whether blue paste could legally be called cake, when a squad of royal envoys arrived at my door, polished armor humming softly, eyes glowing with the faint irritation of beings forced to do ceremonial work before breakfast. They informed me, very politely and with weapons very visibly active, that the Queen wished to see me. I tried to explain that I was busy celebrating my continued survival, but birthdays apparently outrank excuses. Minutes later, I was standing in a chamber that made gravity feel optional, facing a throne that pulsed with slow, thoughtful light, like it was considering whether I was worth the oxygen. The Queen spoke my name as if she'd owned it longer than I had. She congratulated me on another year of life, which sounded less like a kindness and more like a statistical anomaly. Then, without ceremony, because alien royalty defines ceremony differently, she announced my gift. Two figures stepped forward. They looked human enough to make my brain relax and alien enough to keep it from fully trusting the decision. Their long ears curved elegantly back, catching the ambient light, and their expressions carried the calm focus of people who'd been trained not to blink at danger, surprise, or men standing there wondering if this was a prank. I waved. One of them nodded, the other did not. I decided not to rank them yet. The Queen declared that they were bound to me by duty, law, and something that translated roughly to honor with teeth. They were to protect me, at all times. I laughed because it felt like the right response when a monarch hands you two sentient beings like gift-wrapped insurance policies. My laughter echoed badly in the chamber and died alone. I asked if there was a receipt. No one laughed. The Queen continued explaining things that sounded suspiciously like political treaties disguised as personal generosity. I caught phrases like symbolic alliance, living safeguard, and regrettable alternatives. My birthday suddenly felt like a trap with frosting. One of the women glanced at me then, not unkindly, but with the weary patience of someone who had expected this reaction. When the audience ended, the Queen dismissed us all as if she hadn't just rearranged several lives. The two women followed me with perfect synchronization as we walked, which made me feel important and deeply unsafe at the same time. I tried to lighten the mood by asking if they liked cake. One asked what cake was. The other informed me that sugar was considered a mild battlefield stimulant on her homeworld. "Of course it is," I said. "Everything is." Back in my quarters, the station lights finally stabilized, bathing the room in something approximating celebration. I gestured awkwardly at the chairs. They remained standing. I gestured again, more firmly. They sat. Progress. I introduced myself, as if we hadn't just met under a throne capable of vaporizing cities. They gave their names, layered with meanings I couldn't pronounce, and informed me that from this moment forward my safety was their primary directive. I stared at them, at the long ears, the calm eyes, the quiet readiness, and wondered what kind of birthday ends with bodyguards assigned by a queen who smiled like she knew how the story ended. I picked up the blue cake paste, split it into 3 portions, and slid 2 across the table. "Well," I said, "if we're doing this, we might as well start wrong together." One of them smiled, just a little. By the time I woke up the next cycle, I had learned 3 things. First, my quarters now had a permanent security perimeter that argued politely with the station's systems until they gave up. Second, privacy was no longer a concept so much as a nostalgic memory. Third, the 2 alien women did not sleep. They waited. I tested this theory by pretending to sleep longer. They waited harder. When I finally sat up, one of them handed me a data slate containing my schedule for the day. I did not have a schedule yesterday. Apparently, I did now. It included diplomatic check-ins, medical scans, and something labeled non-lethal threat assessment, which I assumed was a friendly activity until I read the footnotes. I asked if this was really necessary. They informed me that necessity was no longer my decision. I tried humor. I asked if they at least sang cheerful songs while guarding me. One of them said her people only sang before battle. The other said this counted. I stopped asking questions. Leaving my quarters became an event. Corridors adjusted lighting as we passed, drones hovered with interest, and people who had never noticed me before suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. I waved like a minor celebrity who had done something scandalous but wasn't sure what yet. One merchant tried to sell me a birthday survival discount. My protectors stared at him until he reconsidered his life choices. Over breakfast, real food this time, because apparently my digestive system was now a matter of state interest. I learned more than I wanted to know. The Queen's gift was being discussed in multiple languages, most of which didn't have words for awkward. Factions were curious, rivals were offended, a few were amused, which worried everyone else. I was, according to one intercepted transmission, a variable. I had never wanted to be a variable. I preferred constants, like gravity. Or cake. I joked that if anyone tried to assassinate me, I'd simply bore them to death with stories about my childhood. One of the women replied that psychological warfare was a respected tactic on her world. I wasn't sure if she was encouraging me. Later, we attended a reception I had not agreed to attend. The station's central hall filled with delegates, holograms, and beings whose biology had clearly been a design experiment. Conversations paused when we entered, then resumed at a volume just low enough to be insulting. I smiled and pretended not to notice. My protectors noticed everything. I could feel it, like standing between two very patient storms. A representative from a minor trade coalition congratulated me on my birthday and asked how it felt to be chosen. I said I'd always suspected greatness would find me eventually, just not with paperwork. He laughed nervously and excused himself. Someone else offered me a drink that my protectors scanned so thoroughly it aged 5 years. The humor helped. So did the jokes I made at my own expense. Every laugh eased the tension just enough to keep the room from snapping. Still, beneath it all, I could sense the current pulling tighter. The Queen's court was watching. Others were measuring me, weighing what I might be worth if I tipped in the wrong direction. When the reception ended, one of my protectors informed me that there had been 3 credible threats, 2 failed scans, and 1 poetic insult disguised as a compliment. I asked if that was good or bad. She said it was average. Back in my quarters, I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. Why me? They exchanged a look, brief, precise, practiced. One said that sometimes protection was assigned not because someone was powerful, but because others believed they might become so. The other added that belief was often more dangerous than reality. I laughed, because if I didn't, the idea might take root. As the lights dimmed to a simulated night, I realized my birthday hadn't ended. It had expanded. And somewhere between the jokes, the guarded silences, and the hum of unseen technology keeping me alive, I began to understand that the Queen hadn't given me a gift. She had placed me on the board. The attempt on my life happened during lunch, which felt rude. I was mid-sentence, explaining to my protectors why soup should not be classified as a strategic resource, when every surface in the room politely disagreed with gravity. The station's system stuttered, alarms translated themselves into 6 languages at once, and someone somewhere made a very bad decision involving phase-shifted explosives. I did what I'd learned to do best. I cracked a joke. I asked if this meant we were skipping dessert. They moved before the thought finished forming. The world narrowed into motion, commands, countercommands, and the odd realization that I was no longer panicking. That surprised me more than the explosion. Somewhere between the Queen's throne and my increasingly complicated breakfasts, I had stopped being confused and started paying attention. When it was over, I was alive, slightly annoyed, and surrounded by apologies from station officials who promised inquiries, committees, and strongly worded data packets. My protectors reported that the threat had been neutralized, its sponsors exposed, and its political message embarrassingly obvious. Someone had wanted to test the gift. I laughed again, softer this time. Did I pass? The answer wasn't immediate. That told me everything. The Queen summoned us within the hour. This time I didn't feel small walking into her presence. I felt present. I spoke before she did, which caused a minor ripple of shock and a major one of amusement. I told her I understood the gesture now. The gift wasn't about protection. It was about visibility, about forcing factions to reveal themselves, about seeing who would treat a human like leverage. She smiled, which I took as confirmation rather than approval. I declined the role she'd implied without ever stating. Not rudely, just clearly. I said I would not be owned, displayed, or maneuvered without consent. I said alliances built on surprise tended to collapse under scrutiny. I even thanked her for the birthday, because manners matter when negotiating with someone who can end civilizations before tea. There was silence, then laughter. Genuine this time. The Queen released my protectors from their binding duty, replacing it with choice. I expected hesitation. I got none. They chose to stay, not as orders, as partners. That was new for all of us. Life after that didn't return to normal, but it found a rhythm. I became something I'd never planned to be. A point of contact, a translator of intent, a reminder that politics didn't always need a throne to function. I still made jokes. They still corrected my tactical mistakes. We argued about music protocols and whether birthdays should be banned for public safety. The station stabilized. The factions adjusted. The threats faded into footnotes and